Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going? Welcome to Love Always Self. I'm Karista or Carrie, whatever you want to call me.
And I'm Shira.
And today we are going to chat a little bit about perspectives or shifting them. And first off, just kind of wanted to note that, we each have our own truths, right? We're living our truth right now as we're experiencing it. And sometimes we can find ourselves limiting our own perspectives to our own truths. But the alternative reality is that we all have our own truths that may not necessarily be in alignment with each other. So, is it possible that we have three sides to every story? My truth, your truth, and the truth.
Which is so funny because I was talking about, uh, I was using that phrase, there's two sides to every coin, and
Mm-hmm.
I got corrected. And this was Steven, and he goes, well, actually, there's three. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
You forget about the
the
edge.
outer rim. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And we
Yeah,
also
yeah. I totally missed that too, because the saying is two sides to every coin. Smarty pants.
smarty pants. I know you're listening. We love you. So, and speaking of truth, that's also one of those things where there's like that popular saying, the truth doesn't care about your feelings.
Mm.
Um, so one of the definitions of truth, which I find a little bit hilarious that there could be like a 2 bullet point definition from, like if you just like dictionary definition of truth or whatever, you
Mm-hmm.
get something like the quality or state of being true, as one of those.
Wow. So a state of being.
Right.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I know. And then you get a fact or belief that is accepted as true.
Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Oh, I love how that's said, and that's so true, right? Because words and perceptions are a mirror of truth, not necessarily the truth, right?
Right.
So sometimes those mirrors can be distorted, kind of like funhouse mirrors, and those distortions can create distorted perceptions.
Yeah. And I like how there are like similar names, or words, right? Like fact.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have somebody that, I don't know, like a scientist or whatever, and they do a study and they discover something, and this is now the truth,
Well, I mean,
but
think
it's more
about,
like a
yeah,
fact, right?
before scientists were able to visualize using microscopes, different viruses and bacteria, like that was not a real truth. What was it, 150 years ago?
Mm,
Like they were like, you are a wizard and you're making shit up and you are just pretending to be a magician, right? They think it's kind of like this magic thing, and magic is not real, but magic in a sense is just science that is unproven at this point. We just haven't developed the equipment or the ability to perceive these magical qualities.
right. So your fallback is perception
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at that point.
Which is so limited, right? We've got our limited senses, which it in this life it doesn't feel like it's hard to understand that that's a limitation, but it is, because what we see is what our brain is able to receive and comprehend and compute from our eyeballs, but that may not be the whole truth because we can't see outside of this 3D reality.
Well, because there's also your beliefs, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
beliefs play a big factor into how you see something or how you perceive something.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the things that you've learned or your experiences change and alter your perception of what's true for yourself,
Absolutely.
um, which could not be in alignment with how somebody else was trained or learned or raised or believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so their perception could be completely different than what yours is, even though you're maybe having a co-created experience, but you
Mm-hmm.
have two different sides of this,
Or three.
or three. Yeah. So don't shoot me. So I think, man, and this is something that you and I will do little channel sessions. We've got some recordings of this. We'll get to sharing that at some point. But one of it was Alistair,
Mm-hmm.
that we talked, or he, masculine, um, said about the merry-go-round with the kid, and how the perception of what was going on with these different children, and this was like an analogy that they gave you, that
Mm-hmm.
your perception could be that, oh, there's three kids co-creating, having a playful experience, but maybe one kid came from a home. I'm trying to remember all this. So one kid came from a home where things are just not great there. This is that kid's escape. So that for that particular kid's experience is that I'm coming here to escape my other reality that I've got going on, and have a good time. And one kid could come from like a home that is, beautiful and perfect, and everyone's getting along and there's no issues and things like that. And so it's just another day of play. So
Mm-hmm.
now you have two different perceptions of what that situation means to one another, um, even though you're having a shared experience.
And just to clarify, Alistair was somebody or a being that you channeled
Yeah.
a few months back. And again, that was just a you and I one-on-one thing, but that was a really cool thing. And thank you for bringing that back forward.
Yeah. Wasn't sure
So,
I was ever going to
yeah.
talk about that here, but that happened. It was unique. It was interesting. So yeah. So wow. So this whole week has been a test of what are my truths, what are my perceptions of things. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like,
Mm-hmm. For you and I
you know,
both.
yeah, yeah. I celebrated my 41st birthday.
Happy,
Woo!
happy birthday.
2 days later, I became a grandma. Super, super excited
Yay,
about that.
Mimi.
I know. And so there's a lot of different activities going on, and you came over, and that was super super fun, and we hung out in our backyard, and just played, which was nice. It was
Oh,
so
yeah.
nice to just have that playful experience, when we work so much.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get a lot of that, and there were different perceptions around some of that. Like my husband planning this out, and inviting some people over. And of course, we've got that thing going on out in the universe at the moment, or on our planet at the moment. And so there's some requirements into um, making sure everyone's protected coming over. And,
Well, they're all healthy and well.
and they're all healthy and well, right? So that required me to have some experiences on everyone's comfort level with doing that, right? And just to be clear, my husband did ask that everyone took a rapid test and everything. And so um, some of those that may have not been able to make it, which they could have had plans, it's Labor Day weekend, right? Like they could have had plans. I could have had a different perception of what the truth was behind that. Like, were you
Mm-hmm.
just not comfortable doing that? Or, you know,
Am
did you
I
have
not
other plans
important
and something
enough?
else? Right,
Or,
right. And then the question,
mm-hmm.
right. It's like
Those self-defeating questions.
those almost self sabotaging is
Grr.
terror. Why do we do this? So, yeah. So, I mean, uh, and then you have follow up conversations with like your friends and stuff, and you realize that, oh my gosh, they have a completely different thing going on right now, and everything's fine and dandy. Like you know, I am definitely loved and experience that, throughout my relationships. And so it's just kind of like the truth that I created was
Mm-hmm.
something completely different than what the
Mm-hmm.
reality of it was for that other person. And so that's always shifting my perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The phrase that just came to mind was one person's trash is another person's treasure.
Mm, this is
Mm-hmm.
so true.
Especially right now when we're trying to reduce our consumerism too. Save the planet, like that's just a whole nother perception. Anyways, I digress. Yeah, that's a little off topic, but whatever. It's our podcast. We can do whatever we
We say what we want.
want.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. So, why is it even important to consider other people's perception in an event or situation or relationship?
Well, I mean, for me, I have a harder time doing it when I'm in a not so great headspace, and it
Hmm.
takes a lot longer for me to just zoom out
Boy, I
and
agree with you on that.
oh man.
When you're in that lower, like vibrational state, when you're exhausted, when you haven't been able to do your self care, when everything outside of you is pulling everything inside of you in 10 different directions at once.
Mhm.
I definitely agree. And I can relate to not or to struggling to be open to those other perceptions or
Yeah.
perspectives.
Oh yeah. And that zooming out effect is definitely one of the best ways, like seeing it from all different angles. And why is it beneficial? Because it is not just beneficial for the others that um, you're not really holding space for them to, have an opportunity to just be in a different aspect of whatever's going on, right? So say like it's like your perception is not great because this could be on both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could
Mm-hmm.
be like you have a fantastic perception of something, or that's your now truth, and it wasn't that at all. Like maybe somebody is actually like, no, I wasn't cool about that at all. I just did not want to be confrontational in that point, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh really? Like oh I totally saw that differently. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or it could be the opposite. Polarity. Or it could be the opposite. It just really likes to get us, doesn't it? Yay, lower dimensions. So it could be the opposite of that, and you could be the one like, what the heck just happened? What did you just say? Like you have those moments where you're just like, what did you just say? And the other person's like, oh, dude, no, that's not what I said. That's not what how I meant that. And you're like, well, what I heard and what my truth is, my perception of this is just this thing, and that didn't make me feel good. you know and a lot of times we don't capture that like right out the gate,
Mm-hmm.
or we don't express it right out the gate, and then it
Oh, and then it
festers.
festers. Yes.
Yeah. And then it becomes something way bigger than what it really was because we didn't just come out and say it right then and there and just squash it, or
Right.
you know
So I think being open to seeing other truths and other people's perspectives definitely allows for a little greater understanding of maybe where the other person is coming from or feeling, or where their experiences may be causing them to be in a different state than you are understanding, you know, or lacking understanding of. But it also allows you to kind of come together and work together to compromise, to help each other understand where each other person is at and is going, and trying to come together to collaborate to improve a situation, events, relationships, outcomes, and possibly even your future with them. So it has an opportunity for creating new awareness and expanding that awareness.
yeah, it does. And how can we practice this understanding, or this well, I guess this practice really? How can
Hmm.
we practice this practice?
Of
uh,
uh, being open to alternative truths,
right,
right?
right.
Because first of all, probability, right, is infinite of what different perceptions different realities are, different choices. Um, the probability is vast and great. So rather than just staying in your own head and contemplating all those different probabilities, you're still limiting your view of the potential probabilities of that situation. So being able to have a dialogue and have a conversation with the other person about where this feeling came from, where your thoughts, what they were related to, it can create a better relationship.
Lowering, I was hearing lowering uh, your expectations towards the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's definitely something to consider, right? Our expectations can set us up for disappointment. So, learning to let go of expectations of how a situation or an event will turn out,
Yeah.
releases you from being attached to that.
Or even also attempting to feel a more positive outcome. So
Or,
let's,
sorry, even recognizing that the outcome isn't the most important part of it, anyways.
yep.
It's everything in between, from beginning to end. It's that dynamic, that a relationship, the conversation, the practicing kindness and compassion, and acceptance. Even you may not agree, we can still accept and love despite.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on when, because I mean, this again, this is something that I'm still trying to be better at myself, right?
The
Like,
blind leading the blind here.
so, and I'm sure so many people can relate to this. Like, you get into into this, like, say like a situation happens, like you're having a conversation with somebody, or you're going about your day and you're having an experience, and to you, a snippet of that experience just feels terrible. Like, it doesn't feel good. And your first emotional response is to either react or just, feel bad or whatever. Uh,
Internalize, yeah.
internalize, right? And, you know, shifting your perception of that situation, or trying to even bring your awareness to, okay, how is this all playing out? What are the other sides of this coin, right? Um that doesn't always happen so quickly. Usually that's something, because of our, beliefs and training and everything, right? Like, sometimes these emotional states are a lot harder to get to, and that zooming out and all this stuff is harder to shift to right out the gate. I mean, that takes practice, right? Like, that's not something that, you know, if you haven't been practicing this already, or this is not part of your natural state of being, then it's harder to shift over to that immediately. And so I think trying to find a way to, like, I've heard people say something like, I count to three, right? Like, I'm like, what?
That fast? That works for you?
That works? Okay. I was like, man, I was just in like an all American rage. Like, I didn't even, I couldn't even get there, Like, I was like, maybe I counted to 3 days. Like, definitely didn't count
That
30
sounds like,
seconds,
yeah.
you
That,
know?
that sounds.
I was like, what? Okay. Um, but what are some of the things that we can do to start practicing? Like, this is just something that I'm actually uniquely interested in. Like, what are some of the things that we can do to start practicing getting and shifting into that,
Mhm,
different state of
mhm.
awareness?
Well, I think you really like you hit the nail on the head. Well, higher self hit the nail on the head, because I forget this step all the time. Zooming out,
Yeah.
you get so focused on this tiny little aspect of shit talking or whatever it is, like angry moment or hurtful moment, and then you forget all the different, things that are like intertwined with it.
Yeah.
and how all those different external things are impacting this one tiny little pinpoint spot that you're hyper focused on.
Yeah.
So zooming out.
we're totally doing like jazz hands and like finger puppets. So if you're watching this on YouTube, sorry, I'm gonna plug that right quick. And then you shift on over there to see us, but whatever.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Don't forget to subscribe. Okay. So
So zooming out and even take a beat and being open to, okay, what other things are impacting this situation that are outside of my immediate awareness, and being open to receiving potential information. And it may not be divulgent in all of the information, but whatever you need to know will be presented. And I think this is another tough one for me, is in that moment of whatever I'm feeling, my perception is of a situation, finding a way to come back to neutral. So, how do we come back to neutral?
yeah, I would say that. Mm, mm, I mean, again, this is one I'm still working on, but my biggest one, which doesn't happen immediately, it's not like I'm going to sit there and meditate in the middle of a conversation and just be like, like, you stop talking. I'm going to close my eyes and try to shift my awareness to your different perspectives, right? It's going to be all about communication at that point, simply asking the questions without feeling the resentment right off the gate, right? That's the best one that I've come up with so far. Like if somebody like irritates me or like, makes me sad or upset in any way, or if I'm not reading the room right, because that happens too, then the only thing I can do at that point in order to understand where they're coming from is just simply ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I got an answer to my question. We choose neutrality.
I'm gonna choose. I'm gonna choose neutrality.
What do you mean I'm gonna choose?
Right. So like, what if I just walk into this situation that I know isn't that great or whatever, and like I've already brought in my own story that I'm telling myself. Thank you, Brene. And like, all that is already up front and center. It all came with me in this little package, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can I take myself out of that state and just allow this to? Yeah, let me hear it. I was like, oh, little light bulb came on. I want to hear this.
So I heard positive affirmations.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what a positive affirmation is, we'll link to a previous episode about, affirmations and afformations. But it starts with, the creation of the thought in the head, verbalizing it, creating action into it. So
changing your mindset.
Yeah. So choosing neutrality, right? Stating, I am in a space of neutrality.
Repeated message to tell yourself on a day-to-day basis until you actually just become that.
Mm-hmm. I am calm. I am at peace. Ta-da. And then the magic happens. No, it doesn't. It takes practice for sure. And a lot of repetition, as we were taught as children, in creating patterns, repetition is key.
It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't checked out Joe Dispenza, he does a lot of this work, right? And used a lot of scientific evidence to back it up. Check him out. He's got a lot of content out there as well. That's, it's so interesting to me to just think about all the things that we've trained ourselves to do, all the things that we've brought into our own, what we've decided to focus on as that thing to be aware of, versus the full awareness of everything that is around and all the different perspectives that are occurring at that point in time. And so when we have decided to just stay in our own bubble and you know what, this is my truth, that's all there is to it, I'm going to stick
Mm,
with that conviction and I'm not going to even try or attempt to understand anybody else's truth.
that is stiff thinking. Meaning it's unmovable. It's not very pliable. And so you're going to get a lot less growth if you're not willing to find some flexibility, right? If you are a plant under a tree that's grown and out, overshadowed you, and now you need to be flexible and reach outwards outside of the shade to get the sunlight, right?
Oh.
So learning how to become a little bit more flexible, and something that came to mind was letting go and letting flow, right? Stop fighting the wave rather than riding the wave.
Man, and that actually made me think about when, sometimes if like you and I are like, okay, we're going to have a bit of a conversation and we're going to talk about this, and sometimes I'll just sit and be like, okay, I literally, I've got nothing, and I'm just going to consult with my higher self for a second. I'll just
Mm-hmm.
kind of tell the rest of Mount Glass to step aside for a second. I'm going to focus fully on higher self. One of the messages that came through that I wasn't entirely sure what that meant was taking shortcuts. And it's actually starting to make sense now what that means. And that's taking shortcuts on your own, perception of others. And by doing so, you're just excluding. And that's normally what happens when you're taking shortcuts. And sometimes they're beneficial. Don't get me wrong. Shortcuts, when you're traveling, that helps. But like, some when you start taking shortcuts in your relationships and the way you communicate, then the perception of others and what
Mm-hmm.
becomes the truth of others is not always clear
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or
And that
accurate.
can be, tough to put into practice, right? And it can feel like you're over communicating, but sometimes it's needed to over communicate for a while so that the two of you can start to reach an understanding of your communication styles, and can start to understand a little bit more one person's meaning versus another person's meaning, of the same word.
Right.
And so semantics can be important, or at least making sure that you are, explaining clearly and being open to clarifying questions without, you know, being frustrated or upset.
And I just heard willingness to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm
It
smiling only
takes
because I struggle with that sometimes. I'm like, yeah, I don't.
being willing to listen and receive from both sides.
Yeah,
It's about, again, collaboration, coming together, and it takes both sides listening to each other to really collaborate, right?
yeah, it does. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
We're ridiculous. I love it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hello.
Wait, that was the Kool-Aid guy, right?
Oh, yeah. Gosh. I miss the Kool-Aid guy. Bring him back.
We just don't watch TV with commercials, that's all.
But what if it just like it was like a quick pop in the middle of what you're watching? All of a sudden, the Kool-Aid man just like busts out of a wall in the background. And you're like, ah! Sorry,
See, and that's your
imagination.
perception that would be fun.
That would be fun. There's probably a lot of people listening to this like, what? My perception is that was dumb. That's my truth, and I'm sticking to it. See, that's me being stubborn, taking shortcuts, not listening.
So again, like, shifting perspectives, it's not about like who is right, who is wrong. It's about coming together to try and understand one another so that you can, support each other and love each other and build each other up. It's not about breaking down. It's you know again, it's teamwork.
I mean, what would that be like if we lived in a world, right? Like, I'm just thinking about this. Like, what would that be like? We live in a world where we remove the good versus bad thought process, the judgmental aspect of it. And we're simply having a conversation from a completely neutral perspective. And everything that you are absorbing, you're just learning and absorbing it. And you're like, huh. And you're having like all these like taught lessons of aha moments of like, that's
Mhm.
interesting, right? But you're not like in a place of like negative or positive. You're just
You're not judging, you're not feeling defensive of your stance, you're just open to hearing.
right. Man, that'd be
Gosh,
beautiful.
that made me, yeah, that just made me think about how much better off this world would be. Like, even just coming together, all the different countries over the world, being able to talk and just be open to listening about concerns about, the oh shoot, climate change. There we go.
Cli- Climate change. I mean, religion. Like, I mean, what would that be like if you're just like, wow, okay, so your belief
Freedom
is
to express.
right. Like your belief is based off of what you've learned on these different aspects. Okay, fascinating, right? Like, and you're just talking about it. You're just having this
Right.
like back and forth conversation, and you're
Again, not
expressing
saying you're wrong or I'm right.
right.
It's just, oh, wow, that's really an interesting perspective. Or I never knew that that was a belief of yours.
And you're
That's
not pushing your perspective on the other person and trying to get them to change their mind necessarily,
mm,
right? So you're just fascinated with the aspects that are occurring.
we're so stuck in this like method of communicating in debate style.
Oh my gosh. It's so
Can we take a
prominent in my
break?
life. It's crazy.
Can we take a break from debating who's
I
right and
don't want to
wrong?
debate, just listen.
Who knows? Maybe we're all right and we're all wrong, right?
We do
We're
create our own
all
realities. Maybe we're just living on our own individual reality bubbles. And this is just like, hey, that, oh man, I could go down a full on hole with that one. Like, all about,
we,
we're,
we've got stiffness, we've got
you know,
holes.
nobody ever said we were mature about this. Okay. So y'all just take it or leave it. It's up to you. Have a good
Mm.
laugh. How about
Oh,
that?
that's an interesting perspective, right? Act your age.
Oh man. So at what point did somebody say by the time you hit this age, you don't get to be joking
You're not
or
allowed to be playful
you're not allowed to
anymore.
be playful anymore and joke around and
You
who
can't
said that?
dance in the middle of a rainstorm with no music on.
If somebody actually wrote that down somewhere and it's like a public knowledge thing, please link that for us below. Go ahead and throw your comments down. I want to know who said that.
Because that's just another limiting belief that we can't continue to connect to our inner child as we get older, or that we shouldn't, right? That's just another form of control to keep us disconnected from that playful, joyful, innocent mindset.
Because somebody, I mean, in speaking of perceptions and their truth and other people's truths and your own truth, right? For me, I find it to be more fun to laugh, and so I giggle a lot, and I'm, and
Obviously, we
I
do.
do, I totally giggle a lot, and for me, that's not a bad thing. I'm trying to have a good time in that moment. Now, maybe sometimes if someone's like crying and like
Maybe you don't want to laugh at that time.
maybe giggling's not the best time to do that. Or if you do giggle, just express the fact that this is what I do when I'm nervous. Like I'm,
I use humor as a,
communicating, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then you're like, oh, okay, that was weird, right? But for the most part, I do giggle, and I have heard with I've heard someone say, well, if you giggle, even if you're having a light conversation, then you come across immature. And I'm like, well, that's your perception of it.
Well,
That's
and
your
and
truth, right?
if you look at a different country, right, Russia, Ukraine, if you smile, they think you're an idiot. If you like, this is what I've read.
Oh,
Their
wow.
culture thinks you're an idiot if you smile for no reason.
You're just walking by and just smile at somebody.
I smile all the time, so I must be a real big idiot in your book, and I'm okay with that.
I've never heard that one.
I don't know. That's something I read. Again, not that everything on the internet is true. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, my bad. It's not my intention. Anyways, um, one final point on this playing thing. When children are growing up at the toddler age. Play is considered as one of the most important things that children should be doing, right? It helps them learn how to share, it helps them learn how to communicate, it helps them be able to, manipulate themselves through society. It teaches them these things. So, when and why are we supposed to stop doing that?
They're like,
Because I think
oh,
we're supposed to be practicing communicating like always and sharing and working together and teamwork and collaboration. So tell me why play is not important as an adult, too.
I mean, they built Las Vegas. It is an adult playground, probably then
Well,
some. But I'm just saying, like, you built an entire city around adults being able to play. Like, this should be a thing, right? Like, this should just totally be a thing. I understand that there's times for being serious. We all know that. There's
I mean, like,
definitely
even
times
like
for being serious.
tumbling and playing pretend and,
Yeah.
like physical movement as play,
Oh my God,
not
there's this
just as
lady.
exercise.
I feel like you showed me this TikTok, but this young lady that has this TikTok and she creates these fairy environments
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and like fairy dinner parties, and she dresses up, and she'll decorate parts of the forest or the woods by where she lives, and she does all these really cool, like, fun magical things, and it's just for her, this is her form of expressing playfulness
Mm-hmm.
and being in this world that she's just
Mm-hmm.
creating. And I
Mm-hmm.
love every minute of that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And somebody else's perception could just be like, wow, she's just like a child.
Or that's
So,
crazy. Well,
right.
that speaks to, the limitations that are on your own heart
Yeah.
as well. And I hope that if you are experiencing limitations in your play and in your perspectives, that you are open to playful communication, collaboration. Because again, this life, it's not about competition. We've actually already all won. We just may not remember right now. So, this is about collaboration, collaborating in co creation of what it is we want to experience.
And be open to the fact that some people's truths may not be yours.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Ah,
Well, that was fun,
that was.
y'all. Thanks for all the giggles.
Thank you.
um, Hope you guys had a good time listening. We will provide some of the links in the show notes below, again, with the previous episode of affirmations and afformations, and along with some of the other names that were mentioned in the podcast today or in this episode today. We really appreciate you being here and being a part of our journey. We love you all. We love you first. We love you last. And we love you always.
Bye.
Hey, listener, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us in this moment. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and we look forward to our next connection.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to stay notified of new content from Love Always Self. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to discuss, please hit us up on any of our social media platforms linked in the show notes below.
I'm Karista.
And I'm Shira.
And until next time, remember to love first,
Love last,
and love always. Love Always Self podcast is meant for entertainment purposes only. We do not make any warranties about the completeness, reliability, and accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. Any action you choose to take upon the information in this podcast is strictly done so at your own risk, and we will not be held liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of our podcast. Any and all medical concerns should be addressed with a licensed healthcare provider, as well as any questions that may be derived from the information discussed in this podcast.